give me cash, and it's £12.50. Are we ready?
Yes,
I'm going to say
we're ready.
it would be £13.99, but there's a discount because it's a conference, so it's £12.50.
Good afternoon. Hope you're well fed. We're going to start our afternoon session before we go into our transcultural conversations. We're just going to remind you of the sacredness of the space and the primacy of our sisters, the Black mothers and their voices. And in the spirit of their primacy and their preciousness, I'm going to invite Sister Sandra Golding to do a healing dance for us. Thank you.
to your river. I will come to your river. I will come to your river. Come to your river.
Wash my soul.
I will come to your river.
Wash my soul.
I will come to your river.
Wash my soul again.
Okay, that's my water dance. We come from water, we come out of the darkness, we come into the light. A lot of times, as we grow, we forget. Hence, it's important to perform Sankofa, go back and remember. That also, for me, it's really important to go into the body. Because for us to have solutions of what we need to do, we need to get into that right hemisphere of creativity. That is where the love is. That is where the freedom is. Ancestrally, we talked about ancestors before. We are our ancestors. Those stories, those solutions are within ourselves. Now, my life has been one of movement. Through illnesses, it's come back to the dance. Through anything what's happened, Elsie will add testimony. I had a hysterectomy, which I didn't want to have, but it was how do I heal from that? Although physically the womb is not there, spiritually it is. So there's no need to get caught up or hung up that you didn't do this right or that right. The system has been in place to cause things like this. But it's what we do to take from it to move forward, hence performing Sankofa. I'm going to put some music on, if you don't mind. Oh, and I want everybody just to do a bit of movement with me. If I just demonstrate to you first, and then basically just copy me, and then we'll get this beautiful young lady to put the music on. And we can do what we're doing where we're standing. Yeah. Everybody can put your hands on your hearts. Invite you to close your eyes. Inhale, breathe in. Exhale through your noses. Inhale. And exhale. Imagine that there are roots growing out of the soles of your feet into the earth, into Mother Earth. See those roots going down into the ground, anchoring yourselves, which will enable you to stand in your truth and stand in your cultural ground wherever you are, wherever you are. Imagine that there's a pool of white light coming from the universe through the middle of your head, the crown of your head, going through the center of your body, anchoring yourselves also into the ground. Inhale. Exhale. And just from where you are, I just want you to take your arms out to the side. Be careful going to do the ankh. Just imagine this symbol here. Symbol of balance, unity between the male and female. Bring both arms up. Acknowledge the heavens, look up. Acknowledge the earth, bending knees. And just slowly roll down. Inhale. Exhale. Blow all the negative energy out. Inhale. And exhale. Drop your pace. Tailbone. Roll your shoulders round. Slowly, everything is slowly right. Both arms up. Acknowledge the earth. Roll down. Exhale. Exhale. Drop the tailbone. Slowly roll up. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Shoulders round. 1, 2, 3. Third time. Arms up. Slowly roll down. Slowly. We move too fast. We need to slow down. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And slowly roll up. Shoulders round. 1, 2, and 3. Now just imagine you've got a whole lot of herbs in front of you. Gather those herbs in front of you. Inside that distilled water, that purified water. And I want you to take some of that herbs and I want you to cleanse, wash your arms down. And the other. Just cleanse your body. Head. Right down the backs of your knees. You're having a purified bath, cleansing with the herbs of Mother Earth. Bowl of water, and you're just allowing the water and the herbs to stand, look up, feel, close your eyes, feel that water dripping off you from your head, going down to the ground. Imagine that you are being bring your hands back to your heart. Just massage your heart. Give yourself lots of love. Because that is the key to love. Visualize the success that you want to achieve, particularly when it comes to what we're here to discuss today about women, our birthrights, our lives. Black moms matter. Thank you.
Sister Sandra Golden, please thank her. Sister Sandra Golding. So now we move into a space where we alter the narrative from the African woman being the first woman, the first mother on the planet. We find ourselves here in a position where we are now discussing reproductive genocide and the need for us to have an intersectional conversation and a trans-cultural conversation about the experiences of our sisters, mothers, aunts, and of ourselves. So we continue the journey with an introduction to our next speaker. Very, very delighted to present to you Professor Leslie Page, who is the first professor of midwifery in the UK at Thames Valley University. Yes, you can applaud. First midwifery professor at Thames Valley and Queen Charlotte's Hospital. She's a visiting professor of midwifery at the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing at Midwifery's College, King's College, London. She's an honorary research fellow, Oxford Brookes University, and adjunct professor of University of Technology, Sydney, and Griffith University, Australia. So many letters after her name. We haven't got all day to mention them. They're so, so long. The emphasis of her current work is around humanization of maternity use, maternity care. And she has considerable international experience and has worked in and lectured in many parts of the world, and she has over 300 publications. Please welcome Professor Leslie Page.
To get onto my first slide. So now it's not showing my slides on here. I can manage like this, but well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for that beautiful dance. It sounds like I'm a really dull person who's collected a lot of letters after my name. And I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I was the first person in my family to go to university. And I got my first degree in the Open University, in the second year of the Open University. And going to university, to me, opened a window on the world. It's much easier now to go to university than it was at my time. But I've always loved practical things, and the most important thing, I think, is that I have 3 children. They're all my own children. The first 2 became my children by adoption, and my 3rd child was born to me. I became pregnant very unexpectedly when I was 45, and gave birth for the first time when I was 46. And I was at the time director of midwifery at the John Radcliffe, Oxford. And you can imagine having your first baby, age 46, at the John Radcliffe in Oxford. And the last thing I wanted was a cesarean section. And I had a 3-hour labour, and everything was fine. But through those 3 children, I've learned a huge amount. And one of my central interests in my work is the attachment, the bond of love between the mother and the baby, and how we help midwives actually contribute to that strong bond of love, to the family configuration, to the integrity of families. The 3rd thing is that I became a midwife in 1965. And if any of you like Call a Midwife is kind of now in that era. And I lived in the midwife's house in the middle of a council estate in Colinton. And as part of my education, I attended home births. So we went out with the community midwives. I lived with 2 sisters, they were called, and another pupil midwife. And we went out to women on the community. So from a very, very early age, I learned about the peace of home birth. I got the confidence of attending women outside of the hospital.
We're good to go.
And thank you. And the other thing is that for much of my life, I've worked to develop what we now call woman-centered care. Care focused on the needs of the woman, her baby, and her family. And we had a really interesting discussion this morning about the alternative versus the systems of care. And actually, we need both. I've been pushed to the boundaries, working with lay midwives in Canada, where I helped establish legalized midwifery for the first time. But I've worked in systems of care to make them humanized, to help them focus on the needs of women and families. And the NHS that we have in the United Kingdom is one of the most crucial, most precious things that we've got. It is under threat right now. If we have a trade deal with the United States of America, we don't know what's going to happen to it. But we have to work together on both of those fronts. And one of the things I want to say to you about the humanization of birth, I've been working in this field since I went to Brazil in the year 2000. And I went to Rio, where one of the first conferences on the humanization of birth took place. And it was full of people from South America, activists, midwives, doctors, nurses, people trying to provide social justice for everyone in South America. And it was one of those conferences that I will never forget, because I met with people who, if they published their outcomes, would be killed. I met with people who dealt with the most profound injustice. But what was amazing about it was I left full of energy, because they were so committed. They were taking on the most profound difficulties that we could imagine. And I kind of danced out of that conference. And I literally danced, because I know Brazil well. I go back there a lot. I'm going back for the 9th or 10th time in a few weeks' time. But I learned, they took me to learn samba. And the very first night of the conference, I was taken off to a favela to the samba school. And we left at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we started work again at 8 o'clock the next morning. And I don't think I got more than 4 hours sleep when I was in Brazil, and still when I go back there. And so when I go to Brazil, I become this other person. I'm not this kind of very restrained English person. I become an outgoing Brazilian woman. So I think there must be something in my genetic background that chimes with that. But the most important message I want to give to you today is we're in an era of social revolution. And we're balanced between right and left, and we could easily go in the wrong direction. Today we'll know the result of the Supreme Court ruling, and whether or not Parliament is supreme, or our Prime Minister is supreme. And when I think about humanization of birth, it strikes me that the problems that we have with birth around the world, the dehumanization, the extreme medicalization, come from the same roots as the problems we've got with the climate crisis. Yesterday my daughter is a part of Extreme Extinction, and she was in Brighton, and she'd helped build a big life ship, and they had beautiful speeches, and they stopped outside of the Labour conference. But actually, this feeling that we can interfere with nature, and also that we can dehumanize, we can take women and their families away from their social support, come from the same roots. And I would say to you that the humanization of birth is as fundamental, as profound, as important as resolving the climate crisis. And if we contribute to a world in which women are helped as much as possible to know love for their children and to feel supported, we actually help women give birth to babies with whom they'll have a strong connection, a strong bond of love. And that is deeply connected to altruism. And so fighting on both of these at the same time is really important. And so I think one of the most important questions to me is, how do we give the best start in life? What matters? And we do have a number of developments in maternity care that have been really important. In fact, maternal mortality around the world is going down. Maternal morbidity is going down, but we've developed some other problems. But we're starting to shift our gaze. It isn't just about, however important it isn't only about saving lives. It's actually about women and babies and their families having a sustainable future, having resilient lives, lives that can be full of love. And pregnancy and birth should give the baby and the woman and her partner a life-loving start to their lives. And so we're shifting our thinking and thinking about what matters in our maternity care. And so what I want to talk to you very briefly today about is shifting from medicalisation, which is different to medical care, because actually human rights demand that women and their families should have access to the right medical care. But medicalisation, over-medicalisation, or extremes of medicalisation are very different. Because with medicalisation, you get a focus on medical care without a focus on the social world around pregnancy and birth. So the shift to humanisation is really important. And it's quite a difficult concept to describe, but it requires justice, reproductive justice, evidence base or good information, systems of care, and it requires that the woman is kept at the centre of care. So it can be a movement, it can be a way of looking at things, it can be a way of study. But what I want to leave you with is a couple of ideas about how we might move forward into medicalisation of care. And people have found this really simple table helpful. So if we think about medicalised or industrialised care, it's care that's depersonalised. Women going into a system where they meet 30 or 40 different midwives, different doctors, they don't form a relationship with the people who are caring for them. Humanised care is human rights, respectful care. It's care in which women and their families can form a relationship with their carers. Birth is seen as predominantly a medical event, but with humanised care, the wider significance of birth is recognised. This is the entry of the baby into the world. It's the woman being born as mother. The birth of the baby is the birth of the mother. It's about the father or other parent taking on this other role. It's about formation of the family, and it has a spiritual significance. We know that if we give babies the best start in life, we're going to have healthier and happier families, and we'll have healthier and happier communities and societies. In medicalised or industrialised birth, the mother and baby are seen as separate, and they're often separated. And I remember in the 1970s and 1980s fighting to keep the mother and baby together. And when I first came back to the United Kingdom in 1986, even in our small community hospitals, the midwives would often take the babies away from the mothers so that the mother could sleep. And so we had little nurseries. And one of my biggest fights, actually, was to get the midwives to allow their babies to be with them all the time after birth. But often, the needs of the baby are put over the needs of the mother. So we have a number of interventions which actually focus on the health and well-being of the baby, but without thinking about the implications of the mother, with over-intervention. And one of the biggest issues that we've got around the world at the moment is the over-induction. In some NHS trusts, induction rates are well over 41%. So secure attachment is absolutely critical, and we can make a huge contribution to that. In medicalised birth, normal physiological is deviant. And about 4 years ago, we were struck by a number of headlines talking about midwives who were, what were the words, Sheena? Maverick midwives, midwifery being focused on normal birth being deviant. And they've died off a little bit, but I never thought in the United Kingdom, where we have such strong midwifery, that I would see this very overt expression of normal birth being deviant. There's a focus on pathology, risk and fear, rather than optimal health and well-being. So thinking in these different words, in this different language, is important to our research, to our health services, to the way we practice as midwives. High intervention rates versus intervention when indicated, a focus on technology, fragmented care, whereas humanized birth recognizes the impact of the relationship. We've seen the eradication or limitation of midwifery. We saw that in Brazil, we saw that in Canada, we saw it in the United States of America. We've seen it in India, almost a complete eradication of midwifery. And here in the United Kingdom, we had an extreme restriction of the midwifery role through over-medicalization. Humanized birth actually scales up midwifery. Humanized birth isn't just for midwives, but midwifery is really important to it. There's a focus on the acute care hospital, and with humanized birth, prevention and public health, community-based care is absolutely critical. How am I doing on time?
You have 9 minutes.
9 minutes. I've got 9 minutes. So Marsden Wagner was at the conference I was speaking at in Brazil, and he said that we're like goldfish swimming in a bowl. The goldfish actually don't see the water that they're swimming in. And I think a number of us working in health services, working in universities, don't think about what we see, our routines every day. And he describes humanized birth as putting the woman in the center and in control, focusing on community-based primary maternity care with midwives, nurses, and doctors, working together in harmony as equals, and has evidence-based services. And this evidence base is absolutely crucial. What humanized care is, and you can have humanized politics as well, but what humanized care is human rights and evidence working together. The ICM developed a definition of humanized care, and I led this development when I was a part of the ICM a couple of years ago. Care that recognizes the significance of birth for individuals, family, and society, respects human rights, access to high-quality evidence-based care, putting the woman at the center of care, recognizing the mother and baby are inseparable. The woman and her baby and family are treated with dignity and respect, and the woman has the right to make decisions about her care. And actually, if we think about one thing we can do in our everyday lives, it's listening to the woman or the women in front of us, listening to their experience, what they want, thinking about the evidence, helping them understand it. And ultimately, they have the absolute right to make decisions about their care. There can be no compromise on that. This decision-making process will be enhanced by a relationship of reciprocity with her midwife or midwives, and supported through the appropriate provision of high-quality information. And Liz Newnham, a wonderful midwife scholar from Australia, has been working with Lois McKellar and Jan Pincombe, and they've written a book called Towards the Humanization of Birth. And this is about the hospital system and the dominance of medicalized care in the hospital. And she talks about care in Australia, where it's much easier to get an epidural, which is highly interventional, rather than get a water birth. And she talks about the barriers to water birth. And this book certainly took my thinking forward. So humanization is about widening our view. It's about thinking about things differently. And we've got science now, which is making us think about what we do. It's about human rights and enlightened policy. We have a focus generally in high-income countries on the hospital. But the hospital isn't the basis for resolving these issues. Inequality, the effects of ethnicity, the effects of geography, gender and violence, the problems Indigenous women have, migration and detention, warfare, humanitarian disasters, commercialization. And we have to remember that in many countries in the world, the high cesarean section rate is driven because the systems and individuals earn a lot of money from it. We have to look at formula feeding. Health services, quality of health services have a big impact. The impact of mental health is profound. And then over-medicalization of birth. And you'll know these figures, you heard about them this morning, but from the Embrace studies, we know that vulnerable women, and I know some people have a problem with this term vulnerable, but women who are at a disadvantage, pregnant women who experience a distance in accessing maternal health care as refugees, migrants, ethnic minorities, second or third generation immigrants, due to problems in speaking the language or understanding the culture, or due to lack of income, housing, or social support, have a worse outcome and a worse experience of care. The women who died, 9.8 per 100,000, died during pregnancy or up to 6 weeks after childbirth in the United Kingdom between 2014 and 2016. And most women who died had multiple health problems or other vulnerabilities. 5 minutes, okay. And we've heard about these figures this morning. White women, 8 per 100,000 die. Asian women, 15 per 100,000. Black women, 5 times, 40 per 100,000. And it's an issue that we're all thinking about. And I mentioned the science. So we now understand the role of hormones and the physiological response to pregnancy, labor and birth and afterwards. And that actually these hormones, particularly oxytocin, the hormone of love, have a role in priming the mother's brain to love her baby, to be more sociable, and absolutely critical. And we disturb that hormonal balance. We disturb the physiological balance. And that actually impacts on the well-being of the woman, and it impacts on the relationship between the woman and her baby. And Sheena and Sue's book, Sheena is here, Squaring the Circle, which brings all of the science and these ideas together, is absolutely brilliant. And then, of course, the microbiome. We're seeing a lot of studies about the impact of the way the baby is born on the microbiome or the seeding of the immune system. So actually, interfering in this physiological process has profound impacts. Some women need intervention, and they need to have that intervention. But we need, whenever possible, to support physiology. And for example, even if a woman needs a cesarean section, she should be offered skin-to-skin care and support for breastfeeding after the birth of her baby. And I'm going to wrap up in just a few minutes. I've talked about the importance of human rights. The Lancet, one of the highest level medical journals, has been absolutely influential in our thinking. We know from the series on maternal health that the gap and inequalities between women and between countries is growing wider. And we know also that there are 2 parallel problems. Too little, too late, women with inadequate access to care, and too much, too soon, over-intervention in birth. And they're often seen together in the same country and the same systems of care. And recently, the series on optimizing cesarean section, pointing out that in some parts of the world and in some systems, women don't have adequate access to cesarean section, but it's overused in much of the world. So the key, I think, to much of this is midwifery, and midwifery, I think, is social justice in action. And you'll remember that the term midwife means with the woman. So it's setting up systems of care in which midwives can work with individual women, individual communities, to give them the care that they need and want. And this is Sadie Holland from King's College London, one of the midwives who works in a continuity of care scheme. And you'll see there, they don't always go around London in bikes, but they're clearly enjoying it there. So, midwife-led continuity of carer, you'll know many of you the evidence. Continuity of carer is a small team or an individual named midwife working within a small team, caseloading or standard care, and the Cochrane Library presents the randomized controlled trials, and the physical outcomes are very much better. And what I want to point out is that women who've had continuity of carer, either caseloading midwifery or tame midwifery, have a 24% less likely to experience preterm birth. Now think about how profound that is. Preterm birth has huge emotional and financial costs, and we're now exploring why that is, but it's a really important development. I'm not going to go into these because they're easily available through the internet. I talked about supporting secure attachment, and I just wanted to point out to you Jessamy's eyes, her wide pupils. She's in love with her baby. Look, what would she do if somebody tried to take that baby away from her? So when we think about humanizing birth, we have to think that this baby is the birth of a new world. It's a new world for the baby, but it will impact on a new world for all of us. And it is actually the birth of our humanity. And just briefly, I want to show Lina's picture. I visited with Lina. Lina took me to an area where she did a lot of work as a midwife in India, in the rural settlements, the slums around Mumbai, families living on the railroad track. And I met these families and we spent the day talking with them. And they were the most amazing people. And those women were so resilient and strong. I probably would have lasted 10 minutes. I would have been run over on one of the roads, I think. And Lina was loved by them, Didi. And we had, I think, one of the most insightful days that I've ever had. And just briefly, because I'm out of time, I had worked or seen or observed Indian hospitals, and women in India are now being paid to go to hospital. And I had seen the way that women were treated in these hospitals. And actually, the second stage room was like torture. Women were put flat on their back on a metal table with their legs in lithotomy, and there would be a doctor in the middle of the room waiting to see which baby was going to emerge. And often there would be a little shot of oxytocin. And it seemed to me it was like torture. So that is what these women would go to. And what it needed, and the Indian government is now actually developing midwife-led care and public health approaches. What these women needed were public health approaches. And they had the most amazing dye. And actually, she should have been paid to provide community care. But Lina, it was one of those days that I will never forget until the day I die, really. The women took me across the road and they were up to here, and I just closed my eyes and they took one arm each and kind of ran me between all the traffic in the road. Well, I was president of the Royal College of Midwives for 5 years, and I travelled much of the world, and I learned so much from it. It made me absolutely committed to making big political changes in the world as far as I could, but also the little political changes. And this is me with King's College London student midwives in their first year. They're now all well qualified. And we had a bike ride around Westminster to raise awareness of the need for more midwives. So again, it's one of those days that I will never forget. And you'll see that they're dressed as Call a Midwife midwives. Well, I've given you a whistle-stop tour of humanised birth. I hope it's made some sense to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Leslie Page. Very enlightening experience there. Midwife since 1965. How does that make you feel?
Young.
Makes me feel like midwives are awesome people with a huge, powerful responsibility, but also a huge duty of care that it feels like a lot of us still need to learn about. And this is part of the reason why we're here today. And we want to continue this intercultural conversation by inviting Lina Duncan up to share your experiences with us for the next 20 minutes or so. While we're setting you up, if you can just stand, shake yourself loose. If you need to just regather some energy in your soul, just stand up and shake yourself loose. Just give it a minute.
Yeah, not too bad. Just sort of.
Let me introduce you now to Lina Duncan, who was an unlicensed yet sought-after midwife in Mumbai and other metro cities in India, where she and her colleagues ran a small private limited business. Lina today will be looking at the disparities across socio-economic spectrums who accessed care as a midwife, doula, childbirth educator, and advocate. She has worked with both local and international communities in the 5-star luxury buildings and on the streets, and with the Birth India National Network. So there's a lot of transcultural experience we can learn from. Seems like this is an issue for women of the global south, that we need a transcultural and intersectional analysis and solution-focused approach. So welcome, Lina.
Thank you for having me here today. It's been an amazing day so far. And I'm going to give you the whistle-stop tour of India. So, Kahani Wali Bolne.
People can hear you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
the Kahani Wali Bolne means the storyteller. So I thought after lunch you might need some stories. So when I went to India, I went with a group of friends. One was public health background, one was an electrician, some were ex-substance abusers, like wanting to make a difference in their lives and get out of their community. And we thought we would set up some kind of business, we weren't sure, but we thought the most important thing to do would be to learn a language that crosses all the culture. So Hindi in India is the national language, although there's 15 main languages and hundreds of dialects. So we went up to the mountains, which was really beautiful, and we learned Hindi. And this is the teacher, Mullaji, on the left. So she said to me one day in my lesson, "Aapka kaam kya hai?" which is, what is your work? So I said, "Main dai hoon," which is, I'm a midwife. So then she went, "Meri beti aa rahi hai." And she said, that means like, my daughter's coming, because in Indian culture, when you're married, you leave your home, and you literally, I always wondered why they're crying in their photos, but it was literally like you're leaving your family and you're belonging to your husband. So they were literally weeping, even if they knew they'd see their family again, but some families really don't, like some people really don't see their mother again until they have their baby, and then they're allowed to, or they're sent back to their mother around 7 months of pregnancy, depending on their work or their ability to move across the country, whatever. So she came home, and Ritu, lovely Ritu, had not been back to her village for a long time. And she was embarrassed, actually, because she was so pregnant when she arrived, and she was like, "I'm so glad to meet you, because I'm scared to go for a walk. You know, I don't want to bump into people that she hadn't seen since a child on her own walking the streets." So we used to walk and talk, and that's her sister Prachi. And her mum was such a good teacher, and she basically fed us. Like, I became her doula, or her midwife. I was her doula. There was a British midwife, and the mum literally fed me every day with yummy food. And that's her mum. So her mum's mum came to stay as well, and it was really lovely to hear a lot about the ancestors. It was the first time I'd really, I worked in the Philippines as well, so I did see a lot of like generations together. I've learnt much more since connecting with Mars, and I went on the Reproductive Justice Retreat last year, which is where I met Elsie and some Julia and others. So yeah, just learning about the ancestors and the importance of knowing where you've come from. And like, they told me stories of the villages. This is Ritu in labor. It was quite cold in the mountain town. It was freezing actually in October. So she had this is a very famous jacket. I think she wore it for a whole month afterwards, because you have to be warm and do all these traditions. And this was after 32 hours. So she had a very long birth, and there was actually a British midwife, Tanya, who's in India again now, but she happened to be working in that hospital, teaching them about a British model of midwifery. She was invited there to do that. And the mum says, Ritu's mum said, we all are married now, because in India, when you get married, you walk in a circle 7 times, and she said, we spent like hundreds of circles walking around in labor, so now you're married to us forever. So that was a really special invitation to be part of the birth. That's Amila's husband. And the dad actually wasn't at the birth, because it was Diwali, and in Diwali you have to be in your home. You have to light the candles every day, and if you don't light the candle for Lakshmi and welcome her into your home, you will have a year of no wealth and no blessing. So the husband actually could not even be in the same city, because he had to be in their family home lighting the candles, otherwise they would not have a year of blessing. So every now and then I would have to run down to the hospital reception and give him an update on how she was doing. And then I learned a lot about the traditions, because Ritu would tell us. She'd be like, I'm going mad in this room, because she was a top-class Brahmin Hindu, so that meant she had a lot more rules than other people, so she wasn't allowed to go in the kitchen for 11 days. She had to cover her ears all the time with like a woolen thing. She was literally sweating with loads of clothes on, that same grey jacket, and loads of blankets, because that was the tradition. And then it was some blessing in that too, because she rested really well, she was fed so well, and we were fed so well we could literally hardly move. Like we had to walk up a really steep hill to go home, and some days we were like really in pain walking up that hill. And Nanny G. So yeah, very special to be invited into their, lots of tea. We drank a lot of tea, had a lot of laughs and lots of eating. And they said to me, you must do this. Like we weren't sure what we were going to do. And they said, you need to be a companion for people. Because she said, I had all my family with me. I had my sister, my mum, my granny, my husband, my father. But a lot of people don't have anybody. So then we thought, okay, we will set up a business, and one of the arms of the business will be midwifery. Because I have a degree in midwifery, but I've just never had a license, but that's another story. And I wasn't allowed to be licensed in India because I'm not Indian. And I wasn't allowed to be licensed in the Philippines because I'm not Filipino. And I'm not allowed to be licensed here because I'd have to start all over again. I'm too old, so I'm going to be a doula. I am a doula. So when I went back to the city, that was a big learning investigation. How are women giving birth in the city? So women are giving birth in 5-star hotels, literally paying £2,000, £4,000. And what they're getting is not what they hope for. What they want is humanized birth. What they want is normal birth, labor. But because doctors are running between different hospitals, and because I understood the language and they didn't know I could hear them on the phone saying, "Me 5 minutes kabad auga." And so they were saying to the doctor, "I'm coming in 5 minutes," and then they would say to my Japanese client, "It's an emergency, we have to do a forceps delivery." And then I would be in the doctor's ear, who's a man, and I'm a woman, and it's not cultural, and I'm just like, she doesn't want instrumental birth, can we let this play out normally, what's wrong? And then he would just scold me, silence me, and I would have to watch this woman getting abused. I mean, it was literally watching abuse and for the baby, because the baby didn't need to have that birth, but because the doctor needs to be paid another £2,000 in another hospital across town. So that's what I saw, that it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter for the Indian women, international women, you pay for 5-star, you don't get humanized birth, you get some kind of twisted, I don't know what. And then on the way to seeing these people, my clients, I would walk past people on the street, and we've made relationship with those lovely community, because I used to walk through the station to get to the train, to get to my people, and the train was the quickest way to get around. And you've probably seen it in Slumdog Millionaire, and that is really true, that open door train. It was my favorite way to travel. I used to stand in the doorway with the air. But it was crazy, but it was the quickest way to get across the city. And the women that lived on the stations, well, first let's go back to the 5-star. So this is John T. Rhodes, the famous cricketer from South Africa. So he was the IPL coach for 8 years of the Mumbai Indians. And his wife Melanie and him got in touch with me on email one day, together on different emails, saying she's pregnant and could I be her midwife, or would I meet her? So I met her, and they had a beautiful, lovely experience. She gave birth so easily, she didn't really need anyone in the room. Doctor wasn't even in the room, actually. But of course in the news it's all about the doctor and the hospital, and they completely eradicated the midwife. And they gave a speech, and they gave a photography session saying thank you to our midwives, thank you for this model of care that you're providing. All wiped out, all the videos of that has gone. And I don't want recognition, but I think it would be good for the country to have recognition about midwifery care. And it was all about the hospital and the doctor. So it's really interesting how even when people find something great that works, like the JJ way, it's like, why are people just doing it? And that's, so that previous slide, that was the midwife I worked with. This is Ning, who's a Filipino midwife, licensed midwife, known her since 1998. This is Rekha Gurung. She's Nepalese. She was a doula that lived and worked with us, and we were all living there in the same flat. And then Alison Sullivan, Ali, she's a midwife from the UK, from Surrey, and her husband was working in India, so she worked a lot with us as well. And this is an artist, painted this woman after the Delhi rape, and it's called The Pink Lady, and it says on that bubble, "Justice, we're coming for you." And we found that on the first day I ever met Ali. She was just wanted to meet me and said, can I do something with you in India? So we started working with Dr. Amit, that guy in the video, in the picture before. He was the only doctor that really got it. Like, other doctors would want us to work with them because it was financially beneficial, or because something in them wanted what they saw a glimpse of, but they didn't really understand it. But Dr. Amit had the patience and the, I guess, what would you call that? Courage. Yeah, courage. That's the word. The courage to trust people that are from a different culture. But he saw that it works, and he saw that he saw his job was easy. Like, he didn't come to any of these home births. He was the backup doctor. He never came. He didn't even want to come. He just had to, but he had to sacrifice himself and his name because people didn't respect home birth, even though home birth was a culture. Like, everyone's grandma was born at home. All these women, their grandparents and great-grandparents were born at home, but nowadays it's all institutionalized, hospitalized. So, yeah, he gave us a lot. These women wouldn't have been able to have home births if it wasn't for him. And this little Janu, I was her doula midwife in the birth center before, and then she was present in all the antenatal care. And she was there at the birth. So I'm going to flip through these and start talking about the streets. You can look at these. So when the women that were approaching me to go into hospital, they were living like this. This is the pathway that I was walking on. And this is a little note that I used to have to get permission from the government hospital and pay $7 and £5 to every time I wanted to go into the hospital and be in the labour room. I'd have to get permission. This has 2 stamps because she went overdue, so I had to pay $14 and £10. And it was really a battle to be with them, because they really wanted, they were young Muslim women, most of them were young Muslim women, and to see them being stripped, literally stripped of their clothes, it was disgusting. Like what Leslie said, I've been in delivery rooms that are a circle, and the doctors are in the middle watching everyone's perineums, and the poor women are watching other people having real violence done to them, so it's quite horrific.
And their families are left outside?
Yeah, the family, there's no person's not allowed in, no birth companion. So I was an observer, but I was really a doula, trying to just be a witness, really, of what was going on and trying to help them. So I need to flip. This is the amazing Di. She's brilliant for the local community. So if everyone had a Di, that these people really are the midwives, but they're just not recognized. And the woman, this is the Di, the same one. So this was a home birth, and this is her. So her mother-in-law was a Di, birthed 10 of her own, mostly at home and often alone, just squat, she said. Of course she was paid for her wise woman ways. The severing of cords was a payment endorsed. Not always with money, she didn't find funny. Her wrinkled skin and toothless grin suddenly appearing. This gruff voice clearing, respected, revered, and honestly feared. Placenta's not come, put hair in her mouth. Bal mume dalo. She'll gag and you'll see that placenta arrive, but don't cut the cord until baby has thrived. So those Dis, they have such a wisdom, and they're not respected. And there's so many things coming out now in the evidence that these Dis have been doing for generations, but they're just not listened to. And I just have one more poem that I wrote this morning because something was left out of this talk. This is one of the government settles. So they get chucked off the street and put into blocks like this to live in a home. And then they say that people are bad for going back to the street, but who wants to live like that? I was the doula for all of those 3 kids, and this is a woman with 9. So in 3 generations, they've lost, all of them born at home, and now all of being born in the hospital. That was, I need to, if anyone wants to know about the birth centers in India, get in touch with me, because they would love midwives to go and work with them. And this home also works with abused teenagers. So one of the birth centers has this home, which they literally, the kids there are victims of incest and rape, and they house them, do all their antenatal care, help them with adoptions, or help them to go back to their community and carry on their school. So this is the last slide. This is in memory of Anita. She is no longer with us. She's departed, and I was her doula midwife throughout many miscarriages, this tiny premature birth, and just a witness of so many things. So listen, I know I'm a little intense. I'd rather be real than sit on the fence. If our aim is to decolonize, acknowledge what dehumanized, we have to face the trauma in the room and in our roots. We have to come together. It's time to tell the truth. Anita, you're seen, you're heard, you're loved, you represent. Like thousands of others, I can't get your consent. Your bleeding was like screaming, your womb like a tomb. You were silenced with violence, and still you had to mother, feed, wash, cook, wife. Your smile a betrayal of your battle for your life. Your identity confused as you changed your name and your religion, never to be forgiven and never yet fitting in. As a Muslim, you're rejected. As a Hindu, not accepted. Your voice not heard, your choice not respected. Even in the hospitals, they couldn't diagnose. Symptoms so obvious, even we know, that the monster TB was hidden in your body. Beneath your growing sulman, a little somebody. So they medicate, we meditate. They compromise, we visualize. Together through so many doors, advocating for respect that's rightfully yours. I saw you when you dared to let your guard down. I heard your voice rising, misunderstood from all around. I loved you, and I tell you again, you were a good mother. Oops, sorry. The pain and shame, abuse and loss, no one should have to suffer. So listen, I know I'm a little intense. I'd rather be real than sit on a fence. If our aim is to decolonize, acknowledge what's been dehumanized, we have to face the trauma in the room and in our roots. We have to come together. It's time to tell the truth. Thank you. And please take a screenshot of that if you want to get in touch with Birth India people or any of the birth center people, because they're really isolated, and so any encouragement or support for them is great.
Lina Duncan.
Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much for that. We're continuing on our journey today, and just to remind you of the principle of Sankofa, which is about looking back in order to learn lessons, in order to move forward. And that's pretty much been our focus today. And that's the journey we've taken with these presentations. And so we're moving to the part of the day now where the Sankofa bird has looked back and has reflected and has been on a journey, in fact a transcultural journey. And now we're about to look forward, and that's where we invite Dr. Jenny Joseph to give her presentation, her critical contribution. And while we are sorting her out, please do let me remind you about these, which will be on sale today. You will not want to leave here without either one or other or both of these. Killing the Black Body by Dorothy Roberts. There are a few copies on sale here, £12.50, discounted just for today, usually £14. And you can buy them also downstairs in the bookshop and come back up and get them signed. And we have a kind donation as well, the National Perinatal Task Force report here, which is also on sale here for £10. So you will not want to leave here without these. And they are going to a very, very good cause. Thank you. So, we're just going to get ourselves sorted out. Please feel free to stand and shrug your shoulders. Just shrug them forward and back. Have a stand. Flick the wrists. Move the body. Wind the waist. Yes, let's tickle the universe. There you go, tickling the universe. There we go.
I thought you were going to be weepy.
So, as we begin to take the conversation to looking forward, are you ready? Are you with us? Are you present in the room? Okay. So, Sister Jenny Joseph, she said, until women and their loved ones feel they have enough knowledge and agency to be part of the decisions around their care, and until they have access to the education and support that they are lacking, they will continue to be at risk. And she knows this because she began a journey in 1989 that has culminated in the formation of an innovative maternal child healthcare system, markedly improving birth outcomes for women in Central Florida. And as a British trained midwife, she has been instrumental in the regulation of Florida midwives since the 1990s and has been involved in midwifery education since 1995. She is the former chair of Florida's State Council of Licensed Midwives. Currently, she owns a Florida licensed midwifery school attached to the birthplace, her nationally renowned birth center and maternity medical home in Winter Garden, Florida. Her easy access prenatal care clinics offer quality maternity care for all, regardless of their choice of delivery site or ability to pay, and have successfully reduced both maternal and infant morbidity and mortality in Central Florida. Jenny Joseph has built up a reputation across the United States and has given numerous presentations. Her model of healthcare, the JJ Way, provides an evidence-based system to deliver MCH services which improves health, reduce costs, and produce better outcomes all round. We're very honored and privileged to have her here today. Welcome, Sister Jenny Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very moved to be here. It's full circle. It's full circle. I started out in 1979 at Edgware General Hospital as one of the first direct entry midwives that was trained in the United Kingdom as a non-nurse midwife, but hospital trained, on the floor, on the ward, and got up to all kinds of hijinks and terrors. I was a terror, but I made it. I was the first of the only student midwife that finished that class. And I moved to the United States in '89. I had no clue. I went to Orlando, met the man of my dreams, fell in love, had the Disney fever, had it really bad, and so, oh, well, yeah, I'm good. And so when he proposed, I went back, got married, and found out it wasn't Disney at all, not even. And it's been a really interesting journey because I've never, ever been anything other than this British midwife that I was trained to be. I've not done anything else since I was 19 years old, and I'm 60, and I wouldn't do anything else. But one of the things that has really made a difference in my life has been living in the United States as a black woman, and living in the United States as a black woman with this accent. Because that was when the revelation was clear. As long as I opened my mouth, I had a different response, a different set of treatment, behaviors, reactions. And if I didn't, it was totally different again. So 30 years hence, I can now say to you categorically that the impact of living black in America is lethal. The impact of being a woman with no power, no respect, has literally a physiological impact on your life. The depth of trying to explain that in and of itself is so traumatizing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through my slideshow, and I've got a whole bunch of slides, and I go on and on, so definitely, please, you will stop me. Yes, I know you will. But know that it's because there's so much to say, so much to share. And I want to speak about the midwifery because that is still my work, even now. But I want you to perhaps, as we're going through it, look into it and see if you can see what is going on, given that providing midwifery care in the United States to mostly women of color has transformed the outcomes, but yet the fact that those outcomes needed to be transformed is what's wrong. That is the problem. The fact that one little British midwife has to do all this gargantuan craziness in order to get a handful, essentially, of women through full term and out the other end. So just bear with me. I'll run through. You know, like I say, keep in mind, there's a lot of information, but you know, I'm just trying to get it done. So this is the world ranking of the United States, and what you really have to understand is that, you know, this is obviously America is the most developed nation in the world, the richest nation, more resources than any other country. So how does that even make any sense? You could put it another way. Our babies are dying. Black babies are dying disproportionately. Twice as many at least die being born too soon, too small, too sick. They don't survive the first year of life. And when I first got to the States, my interest was immediately in the infant mortality issue because that was how we talked about it back then, and spent many years thinking only about the infants, not really paying attention to the vessel, the mother, the family, the community. It was about, oh, the baby itself, and rightly so. But then, of course, now we all talk about the fact that women are dying too. Dying, women are dying. In America, 2 to 3 women die every day, okay? And what's going on is the morbidities, Elsie, you mentioned this morning, morbidity is really an area that's sort of this grayish, sort of nondescript area. Figures I hear 50,000. Recently, I started hearing 60,000, so bumped up by 10,000. But these are the ones that didn't die. And if you're really thinking about this, honestly, how do you capture those that didn't die? And where's that data? Yeah. So 50,000, 60,000, whatever, I'm sure it's 100,000, 200,000. Women don't talk. Women don't have anybody to talk to. No one's listening. And you can't get counted if you're still alive. Who cares if you were discharged from the CCU or the ICU? You're alive. Everyone else is going home from the postpartum floor, but not you, if you go home at all. Or you come back in postpartum, you come in through the emergency room, through the casualty, and now you're not even considered to be maternally connected at all. But you're having your hemorrhage in the emergency room, and no one's in the emergency room who has a clue about obstetrics. They're there to do heart attacks. So the disproportionate number of black women, though, is worth noting. This time we've got 3 to 4 times as many black women dying as white. So I'm talking about racial disparities. I do a lot of talking about that because this is what I'm dealing with. So most of the issues are from the prematurity and low birth weight babies. And again, I told you I was working on the infant mortality side of things for so long without realizing, well, why is that baby being born premature? Well, because it's gotten cut out because she's got preeclampsia. Didn't put 2 and 2 together, right? But the morbidity of the mother is what causes the prematurity, right? These aren't women whose cervixes just burst forth and the baby falls out. Yeah. They have to be delivered because they're in such dire straits that they can't hardly survive, and their baby has to take the brunt of that emergent delivery because of their morbidity, their ill health. So, of course, they were looking at health as an issue and a reason for this, but then, of course, began to understand the level of stress, the weathering, the depression, the trauma, the powerlessness of being black in America, and, of course, the death rates as we just discussed. So very quickly it came to my mind, and I'm not the only one saying this, and now we say it much more often, but it's obviously racism. What else could it be? What else could it be? Classism is in there, gender discrimination is in there. But institutionalization of racism, classism, sexism is part of it too. The condoning of, this is okay, you can carry on this way, nobody's bothered. We've done it this way forever, don't worry yourself. You don't have to think too hard. You're excused for your bad behavior. You can keep your implicit bias, no problem. That's institutionalized, and that's also a problem. And then we've got the social and structural determinants of health, where you live, where you work, where you play, where you worship. Those areas we all know and we are clear about have an impact on your health, and especially around your maternal health. And so there's a lack of access to the quality of kind of care that we need, the culturally safe care that we need. And I say top of the list of craziness is how we do healthcare in the United States of America. So what's the problem? Well, people just can't access timely or quality care. Systems are horribly confusing and expensive. So, as a child of the NHS, I was horrified when it came to my realization that my 3-year-old at the time when I got to the States, who was asthmatic, suddenly couldn't just show up and get treatment. Had to have insurance. And according to the type of insurance you had was literally the kind of treatment you got. And so because we had good insurance, because I'd just arrived and I didn't know any better, spent a fortune on insurance, and he always got shifted off to the ICU with asthma. Back in the day, we used to run in, get a nebulizer, go on our merry way. Nope, ICU for days on end. Because insurance was being billed to cover the costs and to, So think about these things as I keep going, okay? Being underinsured is worse than being uninsured. So uninsured means you have no money, so you cannot have healthcare unless you can pay for it. You can literally hear, no, go away, sorry, we can't help you. Literally. Underinsured is when you have a certain type of insurance, in this case government insurance called Medicaid, or state-issued insurance, which is for low-income people. And so there's a stigma that goes immediately with having that type of insurance. So you're insured because you have access because you have a card, Medicaid card, but you're not really going to get the treatment as if you were commercially insured. So you have a racialization of the insurance industry, right? So I'm going to give you an example in real time because I'm still running clinics. I have a birth center. I have access to providing prenatal care for women and postpartum care. And a young African-American woman who is currently in my practice, she's 38 weeks pregnant as we speak. She was on her second baby, and at 32 weeks, her uterus prolapsed. And she's a young girl, 27 years old. Second baby only, but the uterus prolapsed. The cervix was actually coming out of the vagina just through the introitus. And so she was being seen by my clinic, and as a midwife, I referred her immediately to high-risk doctors because cervix is falling out of her butt, right? So you do something about that. And the doctors were very keen to let her know immediately, well, you need a pessary, you need something to lift up and hold your uterus, but we don't know how much it's going to cost, and we don't know if Medicaid's going to pay for it, so you're going to have to go back to Jenny. Wow. Yes, wow. And I'm not making this up, I've got 1,000 stories, and I'll be here all day, so I'm not going to go down that road. But suffice to say, they sent her back. They wouldn't accept her for care, even though as a midwife, I couldn't keep her either. And so we looked on Amazon. Seriously, I'm not making this up. And we found out it cost $36 for a pessary. But then the doctor that I was able to speak to, a friend of mine, she said, you need to size her before you order the pessary. You need to know what size. And the only thing I had as a resource for me was like the old diaphragm rings, to size the diaphragms. So I said, well, hang on, let me try a diaphragm and see if I can size her and get this pessary ordered. Pop the diaphragm in, and it dawned on me, well, that does the same thing. So we popped the diaphragm in, and she had been told at the high-risk clinic that as long as she made it to 35 weeks, nobody was going to help her anyway because that would be fine for the baby to be born. She's 38 weeks, she's still got a diaphragm in, and we did that in the clinic because that was the only resource that I had to hand. She was sent home from the casualty, from the hospital triage, she was sent home from the high-risk clinic. She's told, go away. And she has insurance. Keep that in mind as I'm talking to you, because this is very typical. So I'm doing this midwifery model care because that's who I am. That's what I know, and that was the only resource I had to hand. One of the things I found over the years of living in the United States is you come up with ways of explaining stuff away. And I had to start making up terms, like I made up the JJ way, for example, right? Because you have to have a name for what you do. So I do the JJ way, right? So this is my terminology for what I think is going on, maternotoxicity. So you know when we talk about the fetus and what's teratogenic to the fetus, what's harmful to the fetus in the uterus, I thought about, well, hold on, what's harmful to this mother? Well, other than breathing and being black, she's got this toxicity around her. And of course, we jump then to, oh, well, the toxicity is where she lives, you know, social determinants. Obviously, if she's living in a low-income area, if there's violence, if there's stress, food desert, etc., she's living in surroundings that are maternotoxic. That's what's wrong. And that's true. It does have an impact, obviously, right? But I really think we need to talk about, and this is another thing I made up, what I call pop-up toxicity. So, Serena Williams, does that help you understand pop-up toxicity? You're in the hospital, hello? Probably a very fancy hospital at that, with some very well-prepared and learned physicians and nurses and providers. So how did that happen then? You know what happened to Serena, right? She was unable to get support for her concerns about her health and the condition and the worsening, and being ignored and being shushed and just never mind. Pop up. So it's the toxicity that is in a response to who you are. So if I open my mouth and I speak with my British accent, you know, then I get a lot more response than if I'm just Jenny from the block. Right? Pop up. Here it comes, because the minute it's there, it's sort of just, you just absorb it and it impacts you. And I believe it impacts your physiology. Also, don't forget the baby, right? So I've said, you know, the baby was the focus for so many years, but first food deserts, for example, this is a phrase coined by Kimberly Seals-Allers, who's done amazing work around breastfeeding and justice around that. And she talks about the first food desert, meaning that in certain areas and neighborhoods, there is no support for breastfeeding, period. None whatsoever. Yet we know breastfeeding is protective, especially where infants are not going to make it to their first year of life. Right? So that's another pop-up toxicity. Like, what's not safe for mothers and pregnant women and for parenting women and families? So try to look at, well, what is quality obstetric care, at least in the United States? What does it look like? Oh, it may be the equipment, how much money has been spent, or the building. You know how we love to see the fountains in the lobby, right? The cost of everything, the number of services, interventions. Is it the type of practitioner, maybe? Because midwifery is not normal. Midwifery is on the fringe. The midwives that are in hospital, the nurse midwives, are delivering maybe 10% at this point of the births in the United States, 4 million births a year. So 10% of that. And the out-of-hospital midwives, maybe 1% of that, 10%. Like, it's not very common to have a midwife. And there's still people who are going to ask you, what's that? So if it's the practitioner, that could be part of it. Or maybe it's just the will to provide quality, equitable care. So I'm all about the big belly. That's how I know, if you get to term and you look like that we did our job and you're right. You got enough to finish this out, however you choose to deliver, and how you do postpartally is also impacted by you having gotten to term in the first place. Prematurity is a very big issue, particularly among African American women. So the JJ way is just a midwifery model of care. It's nothing different, right? But I did develop this model to address racial disparities in particular, okay? And that really looking at the maternal mortality and morbidity, and then the low birth weight, the prematurity, and the infant mortality. Some of the pictures in the slideshow are pictures of the women from my clinic. These are just everyday women. These aren't, you know, stock photos or models. And we try to celebrate the women because you don't often see positive pictures and images of black women, pregnant or not. So the black and whites were in one of the books I did many years ago, which was a photo journal. So anyway, the mission of the JJ Way is to inspire change in maternal child healthcare systems worldwide, but also to re-empower the birthing mother, father, family, and community by supporting the providers, practitioners, and agencies. That's where the work has to be. We can't put it on the women. We can't put it on the families. We can't put it on the communities. We have to stop this foolishness of blaming. Every time we state, well, it was this condition that caused this problem. No, it was the response to the condition that caused the problem. That's right. Do you see the difference? So my work is around, let's work on getting the providers to see that. Let's work on the hospitals to see that. Let's get the agencies to switch their thinking. Because as long as we're looking at, well, it was this thing, we can go, let's try to see if we can fix this thing. And let's not do anything else. And it's not working. So the JJ system acknowledges that every woman wants a healthy baby, and as such endeavors to provide the optimal setting, culture, and environment for her best possible, not ours, not what matches, not what suits the hospital or the private practice, for her best outcome. So the vision is this: all people have access, connections, knowledge, and empowerment necessary to achieve their healthiest pregnancy, possible pregnancy, birth, and parenting experience. One of the moms there she's at 20 weeks pregnant, and just the vitality in the women that come through the practice. They transform in front of your eyes. And we're not doing anything fancy because we haven't got any money, right? So the fundamental premise is this: just every woman wants a healthy baby. Let's start there. So the 4 cornerstones again: access. In this case, because it's America, access is a big problem, which is why it's really interesting and intriguing, actually, to think if in the United Kingdom there's no access issue, then what is it? What is the problem? Because we fight on the front of, you can't even find a provider. Or if you find a provider and you've got the wrong insurance card, too bad for you. Or now we have a thing, especially in our area, where we're making up reasons why you can't start. If you're 16 weeks, oh, you're too far advanced. Oh, you're 24 weeks, well, I don't know if I can trust the records that you have in your hand because they... Oh, you're 32 weeks, where have you been? You don't care about your baby, you're so bad and wrong. You're 36 weeks, well, You can barely get in the door. And that's everybody. But those that do get in aren't getting into anything other than this constant sort of wearing away, chipping away at your ability to feel whole, to feel safe, to feel strong, to feel able. And then we wonder why the baby falls out. Something physiologically shifts when you're feeling so unsafe, so unsupported. Because there isn't anything genetically wrong. We've already discussed this. We don't have cervixes that are just not able to hold. So I run a birthing center, a freestanding birthing center, take care of women who are low risk and straightforward and are looking for a natural birth. We do a lot of water birth. We have no pain relief available, and we make sure to keep it very safe, very straightforward. And then I also run alongside of that what I call the easy access clinics, because again, access is the problem. So you'd have no barrier to care. In an easy access clinic, you show up, you're pregnant, let's go. And that is complete anathema to running any kind of sensible business in the United States of America. Because the first question is, well, how can, you can't do free care? How can you, At the end of the day, I'm losing money anyway. So it's whether you do it at the beginning or you do it at the end, right? So the easy access clinics means you belong. And as a midwife, what I do to get around so many of the other issues that are outside of my scope is I do a triage as part of your beginning care. The triage is, yeah, you can stay. No, you need high-risk clinic. Oh, sorry, I'm sending you directly to the hospital, etc. So we run a triage department out of my easy access clinic, first and foremost, to make sure we can figure out where people should be going for their care. And along the way, it's taken me a few years, but I suddenly realized, you know what, you're doing trauma-informed care. Who knew? Midwife Jenny, I'm like, what? But yes, and the other piece that I came to was that it wasn't just for the patient. The staff as well. We are in the same trauma by the time we figure all this mess out as the women, the families, the community that we're serving. So I applied the JJ 4 tenets, the cornerstones to the trauma-informed model: access, connections, knowledge, and empowerment. So the access is obviously you get in the door, you actually now have a maternal medical home, you belong, you have been literally what we would call booked for your pregnancy. Now think about that. If you don't get to me, you actually have nowhere else. There isn't like, oh, let me go down to the regional hospital and I'll book there. There isn't any access point. You're just supposed to figure it out on your own. So access to our team, so immediately you get someone who supports you, answers your questions, and then we do the linkages on your behalf rather than the other way round. You see, again, not putting the onus on the mom to figure it all out, but rather that here we are, we'll help you, we're hand in hand. And you know, little simple tweaks like that get you people who look like this. Right? It's not a common picture. See those babies, look at those thighs. See the rolls? These are postpartum moms, breastfeeding moms, young moms, single moms, moms who would have formerly been in a system where somewhere along the line, they'd be at the NICU at this point. They'd be waiting on, can my baby be discharged yet? Oh yeah, is baby big enough to go home? 5 minutes. Oh dear, 5 minutes. Okay. Well then, with that, I'm going to have to just move right past a lot of this stuff. I'm going to try to, what I'll do, I know, but I actually planned for an hour, so I apologize. No. Yes? No? Yeah, okay. What? Yes. Okay, okay, I'll go fast, Elsie, I will. So, the other piece we looked at is how the atmosphere is of the clinic settings, because we wanted to make sure the mums are comfortable. So, and the dad. So we have a couch in exam rooms. So each room has its own couch. So dads are feeling comfortable, the kids are welcome, the kids are able to be settled. We obviously try to make it as culturally supportive as we can. That's the breastfeeding room. In the birthing center itself, each room has a tub. That's the inflatable tub in the corner there. They have walk-in showers, ensuite bathrooms. Very much, you know, home from home setting. The second point is to connect mother and baby and dad and family. Like the work of this work is about connection. So I had to come up with what are my commodities, because again, we don't have money. So it was, well, we have oxytocin, right? We have bonding, we have connections. And so we work that. That's part of the program, a part of the protocol, right? But the other thing is that we're not just connecting the family to the services, but we're connecting ourselves to our community via this work. People leave our office and share. Go over there, they'll treat you right. Go over there, they'll let you in. Go over there, she's got a funny accent, but she's going to take care of you. Right? They do the marketing for us. And the other connections that are really important were the staff connections. We work as a team in a way that everybody's on the same level, on the same plane. The nurse practitioner or the nurse midwife is not in charge of everybody. We don't have any physicians. The best and most useful person in my team is my receptionist, because she has to smile. Yeah. She has to get eye contact. She has to greet by name, and then she can do her work. It's in that order. And that's a tremendous difference. We have so many tears at the front desk because people are not expecting to be treated and welcomed, acknowledged that way. Then we have waiting. We wait in a circle and we make sure we get the education done. We make sure that the families are waiting in community. Then they get to hang out with the nurse for a little while and get to talk with her. Then they come and see the midwife for a little while, talk with the midwife. They go back round. And so they're in the clinic for maybe an hour, hour and a half. And because I have to do volume, I'm seeing the patient myself maybe 5 minutes. But it's more than enough. So the connection is to find ways to use the resources you have and keep them going. So this is just some of the staff here. June on the end, she's my most important person because she's my peer educator and resource lady. She knows everything and everybody. And she's a connector. Yes, the far left, that's Miss June. She's in charge of everything. And the others are medical assistants. One is going on to nurse midwifery. But I work from the community health worker model, and they're all trained and certified as community health workers, even though they work inside of my clinic. we've had to find, again, ways to make it cost effective. The third tenet is knowledge. So this is our culture. We are having a full-term baby, everybody. That's it. You don't need to go to class. Just get a big belly. And when people ask you, how do you do it? We tell them, and that's the end of it. So we do a lot of baby showers and events to try to do some education and fun at the same time. But much of it is customized, one-on-one. What do you need? What's going on? And people trust and are comfortable enough to disclose what's truly going on, and then we can really help them. Sometimes when we can, we'll do some home visits, but not very often because it's very expensive. But the other piece of education and knowledge that has to be shared is with our community. This is us at the mayor's office at the City Hall, and we had a campaign where we were really wanting to draw attention to the problem. I found out just by going on Google, 1,667 babies had died in that year, 2008. In the state of Florida. 1,600 dead babies, majority of which were black. Which means, and if you think about that relationship to the mothers, how badly off were those mothers then? The 1,600 babies to be born and die in the state of Florida. And they didn't know when I got to City Hall, they had no idea. And we knit hats as a little way to sort of mark the campaign, and we knit preemie hats, and we knit full-term head hats. And I only had a few minutes, so I'm like, I only have a few minutes, right? And so I had my hats. Yeah, because you see, the thing was, you could simply ask people this question, which hat would you prefer for your baby? And we had 1,000 hats on the table there. It's not easy to see, more than 1,000 hats. We didn't even have enough hats to match babies. So the fourth one is empowerment, and really this is important. Empowerment for the mother. This woman, I'm going to show you her picture. She was actually using crack cocaine when she started her pregnancy. She came to me at 16 weeks. We finally helped her get into rehab, and she was in a residential rehab, and she was seeing the high-risk perinatologist, and she aggravated them so much they sent her back to me. And she went to she was 36 weeks in the picture. She went to term. She had a lovely birth in the hospital. But she was back out in the street by 6 weeks postpartum. There's no services, no resources. After the pregnancy, we lost her, the grandchild. The baby was raised by the grandma. So the other thing is to keep in mind the empowerment is also for the staff. We've got to figure a way to support the people who are doing the work. And this team, it's like second to none. They're like my little midwife extenders, and they are all midwives because they're practicing a midwifery model of care. So midwifery for me, as a, it's been my entire life, my career, but I had to learn to let go of certain pieces. So for example, I don't catch many of these babies. Of the 1,000 women we see all year, 900 are going to the hospital because that's their choice. And that took a little bit of work. I had to kind of get over myself, right? Because it was like, well, no, I can do a really good delivery for you. And that was the whole concept that had to be let go. And then I realized the other staff members are equally able to provide midwifery model care. And that was a key for us. So, okay, I do only really have 5. Okay, I'm going to go. So again, just another picture, a glimpse of what these women, who they are, what they look like. I was going to tell you the story of Shannon's birth, but I'm going to skip the... Well, I can't. I'm going to skip the story of Shannon's birth. I'm going to get to... I just want to talk a little bit about the outcomes, because I want you to understand this is not just me running my mouth. So we did a study back in 2007. This was the first one we'd ever done. Enrolled 100 women prospectively, and these were all easy access clinic women, not the birth center women, because we know they were healthy. We knew those women would be fine. 100 women enrolled. We waited to see what happened. Look what happened. These are the women that in the same zip code were at a risk of their baby being born prematurely, right? But we didn't have not one African American or Hispanic woman who had a low birth weight baby. So let me show you this way so you can get a better sense. The black women in the line with 21.4%, that was the Orange County, and then the other 19.5 was the Florida rate the same year. Oh, wow. I'm not talking about, oh, we dropped it down, look, we made it to 18%. Woo, we're doing such good work after we spent a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of energy. No, gone. Zero. Yeah. Zero. And I really want to stress that. This is done on what? Respect, compassion, humility, open door, smiling and nodding. Like what? What? Hispanic women, the same thing. But look at the rates that were normal around that time. That was acceptable normal, because there hasn't been a whole lot of change. So we eliminated the racial disparity. We also had the C-section rate really reduced. And I was not delivering these women. We don't go to the hospital with them. But compared to local, we were 12 points less for our C-section rate. The women were delivered by the resident physicians, the SHOs, and the hospitalist doctors that are there just to deliver babies. They're not part of anybody's private practice. So 25% cesarean section rate, which in America is actually good, seriously. And, so the cost savings, and then I'll stop because my 5 minutes are long gone, aren't they? Another study we did in 2014, 2017 evaluation, all coming back with the same thing, zero disparities in preterm births. Let's talk about the money. Because Medicaid, the same insurance I told you, the government insurance pays for more than 40% of the pregnancies. And they're spending $6.4 billion on premature babies. Premature babies running around about $50,000 per baby. $50,000 per baby. Okay, so we did some math. Of our 280 women in the 2011 set, 280 women should have had 39 preterm babies if we had had the rate that Orange County had that year. We had 5, so that meant there were 34 babies that stayed in the belly, and at $50,000 per baby, we saved $1,700,000 that year. I mean, this is really strange stuff, isn't it? Because there's plenty of solutions. There's no shortage of ways to fix this mess. Because what's wrong is not, oh, well, she's overweight, right? It's not that. It's something altogether else. And until we are willing to talk about it, acknowledge it, and address that, we're not going to see the outcomes change. Okay? So we've got the Easy Access Clinic concept. We've got the organizing through the National Perinatal Task Force. The report's in your package. The theme of this report is simply this, and this is why we're using this kind of language, because this is the kind of shift we're looking for. Building a movement to birth a more just and loving world. We can't do it any other way. It has to be coming from a complete different paradigm. It's about justice. So we call maternal justice, this is what we're about, and we found that you need to apply those same tenets. We all need access. We need the connections, we need knowledge, and we need empowerment. This is a grassroots movement, and we figured this is the only way forward. The perinatal safe spots are there to mitigate the maternal toxicity. The perinatal safe spots are to be ready to stand between the pop-up toxicity and the mother-baby, the mother-baby family. We might have to be safe spots of one and just do it ourselves for a minute while we're getting this movement going, right? Every time you see maternal toxicity just coming up, step in between. We have to block it. We have to protect mother-baby. So, some hashtags for you. Safe maternity care. End disparities now. Maternal mortality in the USA, that's where I'm usually talking. It's time to tell the truth. Yes. We must listen. So I'm talking about saving lives using common sense, because what I want to do at this point is completely eliminate racial disparities. I think our work has shown that it's possible. Can I play my little mini video? Okay. Got a special dispensation for a whole minute more. Is it going to have the volume? Yeah.
Should come through.
Okay, let's see.
Very little opportunity to speak who are likely to have a high percentage of their answer will always be no. They're using the scare factor just to make sure, at the end of the day, it's all about money.
African American women, they treat different, totally different. When they go to the doctor's office, when they go to the hospital, due to they may go in with the hair flying, even if the hair is not all there together, and they cause it that these nurse suggestions. My American dream is that we all be treated the same, we all be equal, no matter about the skin or the color. It shouldn't matter of what type of insurance you have, everyone should be treated the same way to take care of.
For the stars, this is what this is all we got. This is the United States.
This documentary made with a colleague Paolo Petruno, an Italian filmmaker. It's on YouTube. It's called The American Dream, but put Paolo Petruno so you find it, because there's 10,000 American Dreams on YouTube. So it's a 45-minute documentary. Paolo Petruno. Paolo Petruno, Patruno. And it's really documenting some of the stories of the Black women in my practice and the experiences that they had. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing. There's a lot of information on the websites. Please look into the Perinatal Task Force. We are looking at this from an organizing perspective at this point. It's a matter of life and death. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sister Jenny Joseph, please give her another round of applause. And before we move to our panel discussion and a few questions, I just really want to emphasize a point here. And in the UK, we have a campaign, it's called Stop the Maangamizi. And the Maangamizi refers to the continuum of harm inflicted upon people of African heritage. It's a continuum that is described in the Kiswahili language. So Maangamizi speaks to the intentionality of that harm. It speaks to the continuum from slavery until the times that also has been spoken about in terms of the US experience of Jim Crow and what we also experience here. So we have a Stop the Maangamizi, We Charge Genocide and Ecocide campaign right here. Maangamizi is M-A-A-N-G-A-M-I-Z-I. M-A-A-N-G-A-M-I-Z-I. It's pretty clear that we're talking about environmental racism, so this is an issue of ecocide here. It's also an issue of genocide here. And when we look at the 1948 UN definition of genocide, it's pretty clear what's happening to our sisters, our mothers. It speaks to, and it says, in the present, this is Article 2 of the 1948 UN Convention. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. So this is not me making it up. So it says, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And I would suggest to you that all of these things have been spoken about today. So let us locate that experience in a big picture that is affecting black women of the global south on a genocidal level. Maangamizi? Yeah. Mangamizi. So what I'd like to do now is to, in the spirit of, I felt that you needed to want to hear what Sister Jenny Joseph had to say. So we've cut down our Q&A and we're going to move straight to a panel of all our contributors this afternoon. So if you'd like to again stretch and move, comfort break, while we have 5 minutes to set the room up for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to bring them forward. Yeah, because we need another one actually, because you're going to be on this page.
Sparkling. I'm getting ready to well, I'm just going to launch. She's the last. Okay. So the last bit. I'll play at the back. I'll take it out.
Okay, so alright, so you'll close out here first before you play.
Yeah, you
announce it before we close. Yeah? So people know that you're playing them out.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, I'm going to launch the petition. I'm going to launch the practice. I'm going to launch the petition.
In the yes.
Well, the final thing.
Yes, initiatives going forward. Yes. Yeah.
Because of
okay.
Where are you? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, because some of being sold downstairs. This one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that one. When we finish the panel, we will be selling these because it's Jenny Douglas. Yeah. Unless you want to catch her now.
What's the book?
The neonatal one. Okay. No, only this one is downstairs. Somebody's asking for Bristol.
Oh yes. So I tell you what it is. She's giving it to us as a fundraiser. Because one of the last things I'm doing, the last thing I'm doing there, launch a fundraiser to begin the work of working with women in the community to step away. Support her and so on. So she's giving it as a fundraiser, so that's 10 times. All right. Yeah, you can.
we've come to the penultimate section of the day where we're going to have a panel discussion for half an hour, 35 minutes, which is going to be influenced by your questions and comments. We need to leave space and time for looking at the initiatives going forward. There are a few announcements we need to make. You may want to go downstairs, purchase your books, because the copies that Jenny Douglas has are cash only. Downstairs, I think you can pay with a card. So we need to give you some time to go, purchase, come back up, and get them signed. So, yes. Thank you for staying a distance. I know we've sort of got windows here and natural light, but you kind of have to pretend it's there. So it's very hard sometimes to just stay focused and alert. So I just want to thank you for staying the distance with us today. Give yourself a round of applause. Yes, yes. Okay, so what I'd like to do, we've got Lina, we've got Jenny, we've got Leslie, we've got Jenny and Dorothy, and we have the reproductive justice warrior queen, Mama Elsie Gale. Yes. She's like, who is she talking about? So please, if you could direct your question to a person or two, so we know who you are aiming it at. And if you're going to introduce yourself, please do keep it short. And let's get the most out of the experience by being concise and considerate of our time that we have. So who would like to have a go? And can I ask the panel to move this between you? You don't have to pin it, but it's a mic, it works. And we've got a roving mic there, so we can use two here and one out there. So we have a question from a sister here. Thank you. It's coming.
Hello, and thank you so much for your interventions. I mean, I'm a doula. I'm a future PhD researcher, and I'm focusing on intersectional factors involved in the mortality of Black women, whether it is in the UK, in the US, or in France, where I'm from. And one of the things that strikes me, which was clear in the image, the wonderful image of the student midwives, actually, contrasting with this room, is that how do you dismantle the structures of power? How do you put Black women, Black healthcare workers within the NHS Trust, within the clinical commissioning groups, within the structures of decision, within the universities? How do you fund them? How do you support them? So this is my question for...
So how do you dismantle the structures? Okay, who would like to take that?
Well, if I can start, I'm sure Leslie will have something to say about that. But I've been a practicing midwife for a very long time. I've practiced in this country, trained and practiced in this country, in the Caribbean, in Africa, and back here. There are rules that sit alongside our regulation. We have a code of conduct. In this country, we certainly work within a constitution, the NHS constitution. We have employing bodies who have regulations around themselves. To be honest with you, all those regulations, the rules, the constitutions, have within them something that we need to follow. The fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, we seem not to be able to follow them. We are pushed in another direction as midwives, and we move the student midwives in the same direction. So what Jenny Joseph had spoken about was working outside of a system where the only things we have are the things of our profession. So if we work to those, we stand a better chance of actually making a difference without even challenging the structures. We're just working to the rules of being a registered midwife within the country in which we're practicing.
Jenny Joseph. And then Leslie. Did you have?
Leslie.
I think we've got to consider again that this is almost a movement towards the organizing political side of things. And I think that we have a wealth of community-led, community-owned, community-invested ways of building a pipeline to midwifery and maternal child health career paths. I think that we need to start with where is our group of community doulas? Where is our group of community childbirth educators and women's support? Where are the healing circles? Where are the people who are already invested in women and their own community of women who are then going to identify strong candidates for going forward into midwifery, such that those that are inside of the system can then support, mentor, and bring them along? Like, we can't do it the other way. In abstract, we'll find ourselves in the same place we've been for centuries. We need to create strong community-based, community-led, and recognize and support them to build this pipeline for us and take back midwifery so that we don't lose out from putting people into systems that will eventually kick them out the other end, where they failed, where they feel defeated, they are just, completely burnt out before they even start, and they're going up against a system that is still broken. So I think we need to work from the outside inwards.
I want to think about both working from outside and inside. And I actually want to emphasize the strength of what we've got in the United Kingdom. I mean, first of all, we have some of the most progressive maternity policy in the world. We have Best Start in Scotland, and here, Better Birth, so Cyril Chandler is here. He's worked very closely with Julia Cumberledge. And Julia was the minister who actually led the development of changing childbirth. And that was about giving women and communities power. Now, that kind of policy, I've learned, takes a long time to get into practice. But now with Better Births, we have the building of community hubs. We have the development of continuity of carer, and it's being funded. I'm on the NHS reference group, and the aim is to have the vast majority of women having continuity of carer within a few years. We've got 25% of women on the continuity of carer pathway by March of next year. So that is actually a huge development, but still we hear stories of the abuse of power, mistreatment of people within the NHS, but we do have a platform to work from. And, looking at the figures on the inequalities is really shocking, and I think can be overpowering. But actually, I talked earlier about Jackie Dunkley-Bent, the first chief midwife in the United Kingdom, black. She actually has responsibility for reducing inequalities. She's actually got a very high target for making sure that BAME communities have continuity of care and high-level midwifery care. So we do have a huge distance to go, but actually we've got strong platforms to stand on. So I think it has to be a building of the system, but also alternative models of care, but also pressure groups to push us forward. For example, the National Childbirth Trust has been really important. AIMS has been really important. All of the work you're doing, Elsie, those pressure groups pushing us forward. And the National Health Service is under huge pressure at the moment. So I think actually keeping that political pressure is really important. At the same time, I've noticed that midwives are often seen to be a lower status. And often there is a tension between nursing and midwifery. And I still haven't been able to figure that out. Within the NHS, we're actually seeing nurses are often higher level than midwives. That is being changed, being challenged. So I think all of us have to do what we can do. But what I have noticed is that where are the midwives who can work together with women in a system of care that allows them to develop a relationship? I'm sorry to focus on midwifery, but I have to for a moment. That the midwife and the woman empower each other. The woman actually gives the midwife power, as well as the midwife empowering the woman. They work together, it's reciprocal. So I think if we can work at grassroots with strong pressure movements, alternative provision, but also within the system, so that we build these systems so that there can be relationships between women, their families, and their carers, whether that's midwives, doctors, doulas, or other people working in the system. And I think every one of us in the room has a different contribution to make, and we have to think about our own individual contribution, and that can be an apparently small thing, or it can be a much bigger thing, like shifting a big system.
I just add a few practical things I've seen in the US. I don't know how much it would apply here to the question of how to get more Black people in midwifery positions. That's how I heard the question. And I think some things that have worked in the US is including a midwifery program within the nursing school, so that people who are interested in nursing see midwifery as a possible path toward what they want to contribute to health. So it being an actual program within the nursing school. The other thing I've seen is Black women organizing. This relates to what Jenny Joseph was saying. Black women developing their own midwifery programs within communities that shows younger women and people in general, Black people within the community, how wonderful midwifery is as a life's profession. So you have to have some exposure to it to see that this is something you want to do. And I think Black women organizing midwifery programs in some way gives younger people in the community that idea. And then if there's some way that they can go into training, that could be in an independent school like Jenny's, or again, part of a university's nursing program. But then the other thing, again, I don't know how much this applies in the US, money has so much, you have to be able to pay, afford it, and afford it in a couple ways. One is you have to be able to afford tuition, so scholarship money is really important. But what I've found with many of my Black students is they're often the only person in their family who is going to get a college education or an upper level education, secondary education, and they often feel pushed toward more lucrative professions. I see this in law, in the law school where I teach. I can't be a public defender because I've got to support my family. I have to go work in corporate law for a while, and so it cuts both ways, and that therefore you have to have, again, the resources, which often means funding for fellowships and other kinds of supports for it. So those are just some practical ways I've seen that work in the U.S.
Can I just comment on that? Because I think it's really important to recognize that midwifery is a very, very popular field of study here. In fact, one of the most popular fields of study. One of the difficulties is that students often leave after their first year because of the pressure within the National Health Service. But actually, if we think about building on our success, it's a hugely popular field of study.
Well,
and I wouldn't actually propose going in with nursing programs, because we're trying to move away from nursing and go into direct entry midwifery.
Okay, well, that's why I said it might be different here. I think the thing that, though, is that, for example, the photo you showed were all white women graduating from the program. So the question is, how do you get, what's the barrier to Black women being in this popular program?
I just want to say one thing. So I just want to hail up the students that are here. Can you please get up, and wave the one who is standing up? So.
Yep.
Whoop, whoop. Get up.
Get up, get up.
So the other thing to say is that our collective, because this is who most of midwives are, we are a collective. We offer, so in your packs you will see a midwifery taster. So we offer that for people. We often do it for free. We did develop a level 3 access course to sit alongside the health and social care courses in colleges, and it's accredited at level 3. They get 8 credits at level 3. So, you know, and a lot of aspiring midwives come through that. And we lift up the carpet. There's no messing about. They know what they're coming into, and we help them to find ways to support themselves psychologically as well, because it is tough, really tough. But yeah.
So we've had a question around systemic change.
Can I just
and yes, please. I'm just looking to invite you to ask a question on another theme in just a moment.
Okay. Perhaps I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle. I think in terms of systemic change, we need to see real change within NHS structures. We need to see more black people and black women at senior levels within organisations. And not just to see them put there, but to see them supported when they are there. And I think the point that you raised in terms of midwifery students, we need to have more black midwifery students. And one of the barriers to that may be the experiences of people who are currently midwives. As I said to you, my mother was a midwife, all my aunts were nurses, and I was told when I was applying to university, because I was going to apply to do nursing, no way, you are not doing that. And that was because of their experiences as black nurses and black midwives. So we have to change those experiences. Otherwise, mothers here are not going to encourage their daughters or their sons to go into nursing or into midwifery. So we've got to have that change at a kind of family, community level.
Can I just have the final word on that? Sure. So just to say, I don't know how many of you are aware that the NHS is now, they've got ambassadors for nursing and ambassadors for midwifery. I'm an ambassador for midwifery with the NHS. So they do have a program, and it's, you know, it's rolling out at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so another question from yourself. If you could just wait for the mic.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
Hi, my name's Sheena Byram. I'm a midwife, and it's not really, well, there's two things. The first thing is just to say thank you for that comment, Elsie, the fact that you're an ambassador, just to raise the profile of the ambassadors. But the question is, listening to Jenny and how she's transformed, I know you say it's just a small percentage. We obviously have to follow your path. I can just see it perfectly clearly that what we need are some really big decisions around following your path, because I think if we learn from where it's working well, instead of keep looking at the problems all the time, we have to face the problems, but we have to look towards what's working well and look to a well-being model, and you're presenting us with an answer. And so we have to say to our country now, okay, we've got a solution here. It might be a different country, but it would easily be replicated in our country. So I just think we have to be strong now. Elsie's set it off with having this conference and you amazing speakers. And now we've got the evidence. We have to say, right, we need to keep pushing forward and saying this is what we need. We need the JJ way.
Word.
So no, I've got a question for you now.
Oh.
In your role as a trustee of the Alanthi, how is the Alanthi going to help us to do that?
Okay, I will. I'm going to pass it to you in a minute. Okay, so I'm just about to leave Alanthi actually, but no, it's fine. It's in good hands because we've got Mars. But the thing is, Mars has taught us what to do. So, sorry.
What is the
said, what is that?
What is Ireland?
Oh, sorry, you want to tell us? Okay, Irelanthea funded this event, and they're a charity that give out awards to midwives and student midwives to progress their career and really ultimately to improve the care for mothers and babies. They've been going a long time. It's a charity. We're all volunteers, and for years I've been the chair of Irelanthea, and I'm just about to leave. But Mars connected with me many years ago, and I encouraged her to apply to Irelanthea. She's the first doula that's been on the board, and the first black woman. So she's now teaching us what to do, and she's made some progress. And I think Mars should tell you what she's done.
So what we do at Irelanthea is we give out awards to midwives and to student midwives to encourage further study, etc., to pay for elective placements. I am currently, or now, the new vice chair of Irelanthea Midwifery Trust for their sins, and one of the first conversations I had with them was, why are our awardees all so white? Why is our board also white? Why are we paying white companies to send white saviours into Africa and Asia to teach midwives what to do? So, no, please, that was a conversation that they needed to hear, and it wasn't as pleasant as that. But the upshot of it is that what we've done is we've started the Dora Opoku Awards. Dora Opoku was an incredible black midwife here in the UK, and who had a real passion for education and for change and for inclusion, etc., etc. We had a couple of people ask us why we would have awards that were specifically for black midwives, black student midwives, BAME student midwives, but we found a huge increase in the applications towards getting an Irelanthea Midwifery Trust award. What we next need to look at is how to ensure that black midwives are getting the same educational opportunities, the same professorship type opportunities, the same PhD opportunities that white midwives take for granted. And so we're working very hard, because I threw down a challenge to Irelanthea and I said, we have a choice. We can be at the forefront of this discussion, or we can play catch up in 20 years when black women are dying at 10 and 12 times the rate. So that's what we do at Irelanthea.
Okay, can we have another question or comment? Okay, thank you.
My name's Molly. I'm just finishing up my midwifery training. I suppose this is a question for both of the Jennies. How has your approach to seeking justice in this area changed? Because it must be really difficult to have the same conversations for 27 years. I already feel like I'm banging my head against a wall by bringing this up so often in practice. So we'd just love to learn from your wisdom and just launch that into practice would be incredible.
Thank you.
If we were to just challenge ourselves, our agencies, each other, to take on that justice mantle, we could get this done really fast. Because like any other social justice, it's very clear what it is, and then it's just a matter of will, political will, or hierarchical will, management will. And I think that, and I appreciate your comments, Sheena, to suggest that this is a model, but there's many other models as well. It's simply a matter of deciding, can we get on with this? So, for example, I would challenge us to consider what's wrong with doing a demonstration model. Like, how hard is that? It's not even expensive, to pick a site. Say, okay, this will be a demonstration model, and take a couple of years and gather the data and say, oh, look, it works. Oh, okay. At the end of the day, we already know it works. So it could be where we've done this before. I haven't been in the United Kingdom for 30 years, but I know about one-to-one midwives and the different midwife groups that have tried these different Albany practice. we just get on with it, because there will not be hope for young women like yourself who are coming into this profession to do the same thing over and over again. So we need to really consider that the approach now is to go to the powers that be, those that are making these management decisions, and see who's willing to shift some of that small budget, it's not a lot of money, to provide coverage for a couple of years to do a demonstration model, gather the data, and say, there's an opportunity to transform maternity care in the United Kingdom, just like there is around the rest of the world. And we have no qualms or problems rushing overseas to do the exact same things. Yeah. So we have to put some force and pressure behind those that make these decisions, and we need allies, people who are already deeply involved in the work and are already in positions of power and management, to stand with, yes, when this revolution comes our way, we're ready, because we recognize on the flip side, doing nothing adds to the fact that this is literally just going to become more lethal as we go along.
So you asked, how are things different now to have a work? How is my approach different? I think one of the most important things is that 27 years ago, I might have been the one black woman in the room. And now I can see we actually have a whole group of articulate, strong black women who can actually push this cause forward. And in addition to that, as you're saying, we have a whole range of allies. Because I think that 27 years ago, it was actually really hard to have this conversation. It was very difficult to talk about racism. I mean, it's not an easy conversation to have now, but it's a lot easier than it was 27 years ago. It was very hard. We were talking a lot about cultural awareness and not getting to the root of the problem, which is racism and discrimination. And I feel that, we have so much data in terms of what's been happening socially in this country, around Stephen Lawrence and institutional racism, that we can't deny that racism exists. So I think we have all of that data. We have people who are much more informed and who want to be informed, and we have, situations like this. And I really see this. I kind of feel there's a real shift in, I don't know what it is, in the ether, or, I think people are actually wanting to create change. So I feel very positive. Well, I won't be standing up here in 27 years, but I feel very positive that we can make some real strides forward in the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe there may be a man in the room who may want to ask a question. There aren't many of you. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Monteith. I'm a man in the room. Not 100% sure what my question is. I'm hoping it will come out as I talk, so bear with me. It's about men. Can you mention the word, you've got allies? And my question then is, how do we engage? Stepping back, I'm coming back in. Right. So I am my wife's major support mechanism. If my wife dies, it becomes my issue. If my child dies, it's my issue. And I see a lot about engaging women, but how do we engage the family?
Yes. Thank you.
So, that has been a part of our work, David. As midwives, we work with women, their partners, their mothers, mothers-in-law, the family. That is the work of midwives. And as long as midwives can actually work in this way, we really honestly don't have a problem. So coming down this morning on the coach, the guy who was driving us, he was asking the question, so where are you going? And what is this all about? And we ended up having this conversation. I was thinking, I hope he's keeping his eye on the road. But his feeling also, as a young black man,
is that the men are not supported, and therefore they cannot support their women. So if we have a professional whose entire being is about supporting women and they are allowed to do that, I don't see the problem.
Thank you. Right, we've got 10 minutes. We have a question here. Could you just wait for the mic? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm a student midwife, second year. Mine's question's also about engagement. So everyone most people in this room here are women, and most are birth workers, but there aren't many doctors. And I know midwives and doctors should be working together, but I guess the engagement to help reduce the medicalisation requires engagement from doctors. So what can we do to influence and engage doctors as well as midwives? I know this is a midwifery conference, but I think we should be working. It says, but I guess most people here are not doctors. How do we engage doctors? I know we have some doctors, so I spoke to them.
So Cyril, are you going to say yes?
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. I'm here to listen and to learn, so I didn't actually intend to say anything. But there was...
Can you just say who you are before you continue?
Well, yes, I'm Cyril Chandler. I'm Vice Chair of the National Maternity Review. I'm a retired paediatrician. Last week, we learnt that it is very likely, it's not yet settled, but there's a much closer relationship now between the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the Royal College of Midwives. They're working very closely together, and it's not impossible they might end up in the same building. So that if you can join together these two professions with equal esteem at the top, then we've got to make it work all the way down. And certainly Better Births is founded on that notion. So there's a huge amount to be done. You mentioned one-to-one midwives. It's, I'm afraid, gone into administration, as has another organisation, equally effective, much smaller, called neighbourhood midwives. And the reason for that is that the way we pay for midwifery services in this country encourages a concentration on hospitals, not on community centres. So one of the 28 recommendations in Better Births concerned the tariff. And we had the first explanation of that this last week at our stakeholder council, and I hope it will be come into the NHS next April. And it's called blended payments, but what it will do is make it more affordable to provide care in the community rather than the hospital. And the key there is community hubs. I think they're the key also to transformation of how we deliver services. It's said that the outsider can judge care, but only the insider can change it. And if there's to be a revolution, and there needs to be one, then it will have to come from the bottom up, not from the top down. And so I've been sitting at the back saying to people, so what are we going to do about it? And I've been writing some ideas, and I'll be discussing them tomorrow morning. But everything you want to achieve needs to be achieved, and quickly, because we can't go on like this.
Thank you. I'm going to take one more question, so we have time to go and purchase books, and we have some important announcements around our forward journey. So my sis, can I take the sis at the front, please? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just jumping back to, is it the Jennies?
Sister Jenny Douglas.
Yeah, what you said about encouraging other youngsters to come into the profession. That's all well and good, but how can we, first of all, encourage the youngsters to come into the profession and actually stay in the profession? Because lots of student midwives, black student midwives in particular, are coming into the profession and leaving because they're not being well supported or they're experiencing racism. as Elsie knows, I think, as well. So how can we, kind of overcome that situation?
Thank you. Let me just take the other question. That's one on retention. So this other one for the panel is...
This is from one of my course mates who just wrote her dissertation, which was named Black Mums Matter. And she asks, how do we support midwives to be culturally safe and not competent? Because that seems to in turn produce prejudice.
Okay.
Her name's Kaya. So.
Appropriate education and retention.
Okay, I'll answer the question around retention. All of our organisations within the UK, we need to look at institutional racism, and we need to have policies, and it's actually illegal to have policies that are racist. So we need to be able to use the legal apparatus that we have to make sure that we are challenging institutional racism. And those policies need to build in support for black midwives, well, for all midwives, but specifically black midwives who are experiencing racism. And, we need to make sure that their managers have training about understanding racism, because a lot of white managers don't know what it's like to actually experience everyday racism. And everyday racism isn't just the overt racist comments that you might hear. It's the kind of day-to-day comments about your hair, about, do you have a special religion, special food? Those sorts of microaggressions that we experience every day, but which are there all the time, and which we, as black women, often don't even realise that we're trying to build kind of barriers against. It's like, I remember seeing, as my son got older, how even going into a shop, people would respond to him differently. And I had to start to explain to him that he had to act in a different way in a shop, because people would assume and accuse him of shoplifting. Now, it's actually awful when you're having to put that into somebody else's psyche, where they are, you're telling them that they are less than, and this is how society perceives them, as less than. And this is what we, as black women, black people, experience every day. So we need to have organisations and structures that understand that is built into the training, and where we stop having those experiences.
Thank you. So if you could, I'm going to Lina and then Jenny, because we've got this theme around more black midwives coming into the system, but we also talked about a broken system. So now we're talking about bringing a cultural awareness into a broken system. So there's something quite not right with that journey there.
So last year at the Reproductive Justice Retreat that Mars set up, Jenny talked a lot about perinatal safe spots. And also we talked about safe spots for care providers. So one of the solutions could be people that are safe providing a circle for these support for the midwives. And quite often when I hear people are going into midwifery, I just give them my card and say, if you ever need a doula in your midwife journey, don't hesitate to get in touch, because sometimes you need someone outside the circle. But if we're as doulas, we've started to meet in safe places, and not big deal, just setting up a cup of tea, going to someone's house and having a group of us where we can offload, where people can support each other, where we can just help each other.
Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. Here's what I think, and I was trying to mention that in my presentation, that we must look at supporting the staff, the team, the providers in the same way that we're now looking at supporting the women. We need the same four things. We need access, right? We need access to each other, to safety. We need to connect. We need knowledge about what's really going on, and then we'll be empowered on the other end. So I strongly feel that we need to look, in the United Kingdom situation, I say, look to the communities the people who are already on the ground doing work. Whatever the designation is, it doesn't necessarily have to be midwifery right this minute, but it needs to be, I'm interested in reducing disparities because I will not stand for disparities. That's your tribe at that point, that's your group. So then out of that group and the support that's within that group, you will begin to see who is midwife material, who is doula, who's medicine, who's going to nursing. It doesn't really matter because it's again for a systemic dismantling that we're working for. Don't forget, we're not looking to figure out how can we solve prematurity or how can we solve preeclampsia. Neither of those things are on the table. We're talking about equity. And so we've got to have a different approach. So community hubs, or as I call them, safe spots, are where people of like-minded congregate and then in unison can support each other, lift each other up and move each other forward, while hopefully the allies on the other side who have power in decision making are coming to meet in the middle. Bottom up, top down, but for the same goal, which is at this point to stop the killing of people.
Okay, so we're going to hear from Leslie, then Dorothy, and then we need to have some important announcements about things that will happen going forward, so we need to make time for that. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on, it's very difficult for me because I'm not black, I'm white, so I can't speak for everybody, but I think it's really important to keep on to hope. And we're talking about a broken system, but the system isn't universally broken. There are really good examples of good systems, particularly within the UK and the National Health Service. And when you look at them, it's often from strong leadership, strong, humane, compassionate leadership. And it's often a midwife or a doctor working closely together. And so it seems to me learning from those, doing all the things that you've talked about, the safe spaces, but also the intense development of leadership and encouraging people who might not go into leadership positions, doing everything possible to say you are capable of it and we will support you. But I mean, I feel pretty pessimistic about the world at the moment. I think what's happening at a high level is pretty threatening. But I also see that there's a kind of mass movement to bring humanity into it. But I think it's really important that we don't think of the whole system being broken, because it isn't. Because I meet students and leaders and doctors around this country who are doing the most, and in the United States and other parts of the world, who are doing the most amazing things. So I'm not happy about us talking about the broken system. There are parts of the system that are broken, but I think we can't say they're all broken.
Major parts.
Major parts that are broken. So when you talk about, the support network. Okay. No, I'm just saying, I understand what you're trying to say about the support systems, but the support systems are majorly broken, sort of thing. I'm a midwife as well, sort of thing, and I've experienced, being in the system, sort of thing, being a student midwife coming up and also being qualified for a number of years, I think. And it isn't quite the way that it seems. The way that you explain it isn't quite the way that it is at the moment. So are you saying the whole system, you feel, I'm not saying the whole system is broken, but there's major parts of the system that are broken, and that's where we're the ones that need disproportionately.
So there are pockets of good practice within a broken system. Okay.
Sometimes if you're a black midwife who's overly competent, you get shut down for that. Do you know what I mean? So you're not supported in that way. So my question really earlier was of how a black midwife is going to be better supported by the system in order to support the women that we need to support in this journey.
Okay.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
So better support for black midwives in the system is needed. Dorothy, I'm going to have to end on you before we go to our announcements.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
I would just want to echo, though, what the sister said, that we need radical change and an imagination of a different kind of system that doesn't treat people inhumanely, like the current, where there's no broken parts to it. But I wanted to answer the question as I heard it from your friend who you were conveying her question about cultural competency. That's what I heard. And I wanted to make the point that many of us working in this field feel we need to move beyond cultural competency, or at least the way it's interpreted, because it's often interpreted as doctors need to understand the cultures of people there who are their patients in order to be able to tell them what to do better. And because the problems that their patients are having stem from their cultural problems. And so it does not look at all at the culture of the doctors and the culture of racism that is producing the problems for their patients, or the structures that are the real cause of harm. I mean, everything we've been talking about today stems from structural inequities, whether we're talking about inequities of race, of gender, sexual orientation, of religion, of ability and disability. These are structural problems that we've come at lots of different ways, but they are designed in a way that economically and socially and politically to disadvantage certain people and privilege other people. And those are the structures that really are producing all of these bad health outcomes and that we want to change. And so another way of thinking about it is structural competency. That's what we need, more structural competency to understand how to change these structures and imagine a different society, a different set of systems that don't reproduce this, rather than focusing on what often is stereotypes about Black people. That is what is folded into cultural competency. So focus on structural change.
Thank you. So I want to thank you for all your questions. Bear with us for coming to the end of this part, but there'll be the book signing and the refreshments afterwards. So please stay with us, and there'll be time for you to buy your books and get them signed. Mama Elsie.
Okay, can you hear me? Great. So I just really want to once more thank the Iolanthe Trust for being a culturally safe organization in terms of this conference. It is a huge agenda. It is one that is very difficult to walk, but I have to tell you that Mimosa Midwives we've been very busy. The principle of our work is cultural safety, and cultural safety is a New Zealand nursing competence. I became a registrant of the New Zealand Nursing Council some years ago, which is when I discovered the concept. So Cyril, I think maybe that is something that needs to be looked at in terms of what Dorothy was just talking about, because it shifts the burden from the patient or the service user back to the clinician, so that working on themselves and their biases, they actually are able to then develop therapeutic relationships, which are actually producing best outcomes all round. So, and that's really important. So Midwifery Conversations has been supporting. It came out of a feeling of fear and what was going on in our workplace at the time. It's a community of practice, and it was supporting midwives. It's now supporting others, so nurses, health visitors, doulas, other birth workers, students, in terms of the bullying and any issues that they're experiencing. But I want to just let you know that Mimosa Midwives, who at the moment is a collective, we have a mother voice. Tracy, where are you? So Tracy leads our, what you would call your MVP or your MSLC, and she's a woman that we have supported, and she's now beginning to support other women in her community. There's a large issue around the lack of spirituality in birth. Huge. I didn't realize how important it was to women
until they started talking about that. So we have the mother voice, and that was developed through a pot of money through the Sheila McKechnie Trust. They help people in terms of learning how to campaign. We are clinicians, so we have a mainstay clinical practice. We support student midwives who want to experience working outside of the system, aspiring midwives, even as young as 14 years old. So we've got 14-year-old here today somewhere. We are diabetic community champions. We run parent craft classes. We do preparation and reunions. We attend the Embrace, so we pay attention to statistics. None of us are academics. I don't think we're any of us. Yeah, perhaps Michelle is an academic, but nobody else is a proper academic. But we support women who've undergone birth trauma. There's a lot of women out there, a lot of women having birth trauma, from induction, the way they're spoken to, what happens to them at the time of birth, but also managing a normal thing as breastfeeding. It's a real problem. We have alternative therapists in our group. We run a mom and baby group. We are developing a well-being men and women's group. And at the moment, we have a very successful aquanatal aqua yoga, and we're about to start baby nurture group. One of the initiatives that has come out of the community request is that we start a petition. So over the last few years, we've been working in communities that don't even engage at all. They don't vote. They have no interest because they think that nothing is going to help them. And they want to end the excessive deaths and damage to black mothers and babies in England. So this is a petition that's going to the chair of the NHS Maternity Transformation Service and the local commissioners. And then on that note, what I like to do now is to formally launch Mimosa Midwives as a midwifery practice and as an answer to some of these issues that we've been discussing here today. We're ready to go. We've looked at all the systems. We've had a really good discussion here today in terms of the overseas experience. And I think the US are about 6 years ahead of us in terms of their issues, how they manage them, and then how they improve their outcomes. They behave in a very different way to us. They're very loud about these problems, where we're very silent about these problems. And I think today is perhaps the first opportunity we've had for people. I mean, I haven't really said a lot about terms of racism, but there are people here today who have really expressed their feelings about the damage, the harm that they feel, and not being able to express necessarily, except within very private groups. We have the expertise to deliver. We've looked at every single part of the system, and I've just been supported by NHS England to shadow one of the groups that has just gone down. The money is the issue, Cyril, the money. And as Brenda van der Kooi, who was an independent midwife who I'd worked very closely with for many years, she has always talked about the money. And she's not prepared to step forward until the money is right, because midwives put themselves out. They put themselves out to their detriment, and they're not properly paid.
I don't know if there's a representative of Welcome here, but this is one of the second richest organisations that do policy change. They do a lot of work, but are they willing to put their money where their mouth is? They've opened the space for us to have this conference here today. Is there anybody, I used to work here, now left, but there are pots of money. They have pots of money.
To be honest with you, what we need is, and you know, what we do need a kickstart. And to be honest, when the insurance situation was becoming a bit difficult in this country, the NHS actually coughed up £250,000 to develop a model capable of to be sustained. So that is how neighbourhood midwives came into being. But they just fell apart. Within a year they were gone, you know. So something needs to be done in terms of the money. So not just necessarily the kick-starting money, but the sustainability of the system. So Mimosa Midwives is actually putting themselves out now worldwide. We have everybody in place. We've got a corporate accountant, we've got an emeritus professor, and all the people around us to actually do the work. We've got midwives who want to be midwives, to work with women and their other colleagues to improve care for Black women in particular, but all women.
Lots of things. Thank you, Mama Elsie. Lots of things to support there. Do you want to give out the petition link again, please?
Well, at the moment, because of people who do not engage with the system, the petition is a paper petition.
Okay, okay.
So we have about 600 signatures. And signatures are significant simply because they're coming from the grassroots, the people who never engage with anything, some of them. But you have to be trusted and to actually be committed in order. I mean, this has taken me a little bit of time to do it. But the petition will go online as well. But there is a paper petition at this moment in time.
So in the future, would it be the same website for this live stream that people need to go back to for further information?
So this website was created by a woman who had a really, really difficult birth. But she created this website for us to be able to have the link, the live streaming link. And so we should develop that.
Okay.
So just to say as well, we've got the 2 books for book signing. Jenny Joseph has donated her report. She will sign it, but as a Kickstarter to the fundraising. So we have batched the books at £10 a piece. Very interesting reading, very insightful reading around these issues that we've been discussing today. So Clancy, who is in the orange there, has got the box, so you can approach her, and Jenny will sign them. Dorothy is signing her books, which actually is required reading for the Abuela Doulas course.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
So I want to wrap up now, give us time for networking, book buying and book signing. I'd like to thank all our critical contributors today, Lina, Jenny, Leslie, Dorothy, Jenny again, and Elsie. I'd like to thank our other contributors, Sister Sandra Golding, for the healing experience. I'd like to thank Thea Gale, who's going to play us out in a little while, who's going to serenade us as we leave the room. I'd like to thank those who are not in the room, those who have been tweeting Black Mums Matter and amongst other things, who have fielded their questions, those who have been watching around the world on the live stream, and all those silent supporters, the ones that are not in the room that help to put these things together and make them run pretty smoothly. And not least, you all for being here on this journey with us today, the start of something quite special for our mothers in the future. Thank you. So please, buy books, get signing. Thank you.